At this time, I will call for hearing the Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. May we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Joanne Chester. Adam Roosh.
Here.
Nancy Utman. Charles Warmbrun.
Here.
And Harvey Welch.
Here. We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
We are going to shift the two items. So the minor variance starts first and then followed by the conditional use permit.
All right. At this time, all of the members of the board received their minutes of the previous meeting and had a chance to review them. Do we have any motions regarding these minutes?
I move that we approve the February 15th, 2023 draft of the minutes of the meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Call this for a vote as well.
Just voice.
Yeah, just voice.
Voice.
Oh, I can do that. All in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Those minutes are approved. Is there any continued public hearing?
There are no continued
All right.
public hearings.
At this time, I will ask anyone who intends to be heard by the board tonight to please stand and be sworn. Swear or affirm that any testimony you give tonight will be true and accurate to the best of your belief. Thank you. This time, then, we will proceed to the new public hearings, and I will call for hearing ZBA 2023-minimum-01, a request by Samuel Bashirs, and I apologize if that's, and Lynn Wiley to reduce the minimum required front yard by 4 feet 10 inches to allow for expansion of the house at 606 West Washington Street in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, board members. This request is from Sam Bashirs and Lynn Wiley to reduce the minimum required front yard at their property by 4 feet 10 inches at 606 West Washington Street in the R2 Single Family Residential District. This would allow construction of a full bathroom and laundry room and enlarged foyer by enclosing a portion of the existing open porch and extending the front of the house towards the street approximately 6 feet. As this is a reduction of the front yard by less than 25%, this is a minor variance. Staff recommends approval of the variance request as the request satisfies the variance criteria. This house was built in 1924. It does not have a bathroom on the main floor. There is a full bath upstairs and a partially decommissioned bathroom downstairs. The residents have lived here, I believe, since 2004, 2006, and they would like to continue living in there as they attempt to age in place at their home. They would like to reduce the amount of trips up and down stairs, so they would basically like to add in a bathroom, laundry facilities on the main floor, and enlarge their foyer, which is kind of a double door vestibule airlock foyer, so that it allows for easier access through the front door. The property is located on the north side of West Washington Street, between Kohler and South Orchard. This entire area is zoned R2, single-family residential. The entire area is also has a future land use of residential. This request doesn't propose to change any activities, change any uses of the property, simply opening up a portion of the front of the house closer to the street. The effects to the neighborhood of granting the request would be minimal. No additional bedrooms or occupancy are proposed. No additional parking spaces or traffic would be generated. No new or intensified activities, noise, or other nuisance would be created. Here's a shot of the front of the house. You can see over here on the east side is a portion of the front porch that is already an enclosed sunroom. There's a door entering into that. You can't see very well, but right about here is the main front door vestibule area, and then further to the west is a window that opens up into another room in the house. This is looking east down the north side of Washington Street from the corner, and this yellow box is the view of the front of the house from the corner. This is trying to give you an impression of, this is a plane of fronts of houses. The front yards of the applicant's house is the actual required front yard. The actual front of the house is 20 feet 8 inches from the property line. In this block, the property line is approximately 6 feet north of the sidewalk. So for all intents and purposes, somebody walking down the street actually experiences a front yard of 26 feet 8 inches because the property line is 6 feet north of the sidewalk, and then the house is set back another 20 feet 8 inches. The 13 houses on this double block face range from 12 feet 2 inches from the property line all the way back to 29 feet 5 inches, a very wide range. That's a 17-foot range of house fronts. The adjacent houses' front yards to this property are 29 feet, about 8 feet further back than this house, and 14 feet 8 inches, which is 6 feet in front of this house. If the request is granted, that would bring the new front of the house roughly to in line with its eastern neighbor. It would go from being, I think, the ninth house furthest back on the double block to being the third house furthest back. So it would not create a new, hey, this is the new house on the block. It's shoved out in front of everybody else. So that figures into the 6 variance criteria. The first one is, are there any special circumstances or practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the zoning ordinance? In this case, is that there aren't really other viable alternatives to adding a full bathroom and laundry facilities in the main floor of this house. Another alternative that was explored was adding it on to the back of the house. The back had actually recently had a deck replaced, and so that would take out that new deck, but then they would also have to reconstruct from the foundation up through the second floor, as opposed to simply enclosing part of the existing front porch and adding on the bathroom and laundry facilities and the foyer. And now would be an opportune time to show you the east side of the house. And here is, you can see it is a little more visible from the east side, but there is still quite a bit of landscaping there. And then here is the current configuration of the property. The existing setback is that top dashed line. The existing front of the house is about 1 feet 11 inches back from that, so it's complying with the current setback. And the proposed setback, you can see, is 4 feet 10 inches further down. You can see the enclosed sunroom here. Here's the double door vestibule, and then here is the interior of the house. What they propose to do is bump out the front of the house approximately 6 feet and shift the entrance from this middle here over to the west side. You can see this distance is quite a bit larger than that distance between the two doors, making it easier to move through. And then there's also the added laundry room here. Now, I would like to say, the variance doesn't specify what the final design is. It's simply a design that is within the new reduced yard. You can say as a condition, in conformance with the submitted site plan, and that would, lock them into that. Or you could simply say, we don't really care what it looks like as long as it's within that 4 feet 10 inches that we're granting you. This dashed line here is the new roof line from above. Rather than it being, flat vertical plane, it kind of comes out a little bit like a ship's prow. I think so I'll kind of leave that up while we're talking. And then you can see here is that 6 foot distance between the sidewalk and the property line. That's pretty atypical for the city of Urbana, and it throws people off when they encounter that. If the property line had been at the sidewalk, the required yard would have been the maximum of 25 feet, not 26 feet 10 inches, because our front yards max out at 25 feet. So they could have done a little more without a variance, but they would not have been able to do, this extensive of a renovation without some sort of minor variance. And they are keeping it within the range of a minor variance. So moving back into the criteria, a special circumstance in addition to the practical difficulty is that the right-of-way in front of the house extends 6 feet to the north of the property. So between the special circumstance of the difficulty of finding other places in the house to add a bathroom and the practical difficulties imposed by that 6 foot difference between the property line and the sidewalk, staff feel that weighs in favor of granting the variance for that criteria. The second criteria is whether it would serve as a special privilege or not, because the variance is necessary due to special circumstances. Again, although it might be possible to add a bathroom and laundry room to many houses without a variance, the configuration of the applicant's house does not offer other practicable options. I mentioned the possibility of adding it in the back, which would be costlier and much more intensive of a renovation. Staff find that the requested variance would not serve as a special privilege to the variant applicants, also weighing in favor of granting the variance. The third criteria is that it's not the result of a condition having been knowingly or deliberately created by the petitioner. Applicants have lived in here for almost 20 years. They've done renovations, none of which have exacerbated this, either need for the bathroom or making the house more difficult to add a bathroom to that front of the house or elsewhere in the house. The significant right-of-way extending into what appears to be the front yard was also not the applicant's fault. So that staff find that the request is not a result of a self-created hardship, which should weigh in favor of granting the variance. The fourth criteria is that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. As I've shown, granting the variance would allow the house to come up to the line of its neighbor's house, but still also not be the house closest to the street. There's a very wide range of house fronts on this lot of this block, so it isn't like they're all set back 14 feet, and if you move one out a foot, everybody's going to notice it. Staff find that the variance would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Fifth is regarding nuisances. The variance would not create additional bedrooms or occupancy, adding additional parking spaces or vehicle traffic. Staff find that this would not create a nuisance to the adjacent properties and should weigh in favor of granting the variance. The final criteria is whether the variance is the minimum deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance necessary to accommodate the request. The proposed activities are enlarging the foyer and building a reasonably sized bathroom and laundry room, allowing the owners to age in place. The main alternative that would not require a variance would be a much more extensive and costlier reconstruction of the back of the house to do the same thing. That would not require a variance, but it also would be a lot more expensive and more consumptive of resources. Staff therefore finds that the requested reduction of the required front yard by 4 feet 10 inches generally represents the minimum deviation from the zoning ordinance to do what they wish to do, which is add a bathroom, and weighs in favor of the variance. Staff published a legal ad in the News Gazette to notify the public, also sent letters to neighboring property owners, and posted a public hearing sign in the front yard. We received one comment of support for the requested variance that was included in the packet. After the packet went out, we received one letter of objection to the request. In summary, that letter of objection was concerned about changing the character of the neighborhood, as well as the opinion that this would be a public subsidy to a private property owner, and the fact that this might set a precedent that variances are okay if they reduce the building costs of a private owner. None of these things being in the interest of the West Urbana Neighborhood Association. I did respond to the commenter that we don't decide cases on precedent. We decide cases on how each one of them meets the criteria and on their own merit. So whether the request was granted or denied, that should not figure into future decision makings for similar requests. The options in this case are to approve the variance or to deny the variance, and staff recommend approval of the variance. Get it to go there? Okay. Approve the request for a minor variance in case ZBA 2023 Min 1 for a minor variance to reduce the front yard 4 feet 10 inches. The applicant, Sam Beschers, is here, as well as Adrian Strom and Lydia from Andrew Fell Architecture, who are the designers of the activities, and they are happy to answer questions, as I am happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Are there questions for staff? Hearing none, then you're excused. Does the petition, excuse me, does the petitioner applicant desire to be heard? If you do, come forward and sign in. Well, you're not required to speak. We're just extending that opportunity to you if you want it. All right, then come forward and you have to sign in. Yes, it's a ritual. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Oh, okay, that's, hi, my name is Sam Bashirs. My wife Lynn Wiley is currently in South Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak. I just want to say thank you to Marcus and city staff for their help and just being easy to work with. I want to speak very briefly to that the objection, which I just heard about for the first time. The main thing I'd like to say is that we were really impressed when we first saw the architect's drawings done by Andrew Fell and his staff. In our view, the front of the house looks much more attractive, actually, with a change in the entrance and the reconfiguration, much more so than we anticipated. So we feel like it enhances the neighborhood, if anything, and it was important to us to try and find out, you know, what the constraints are and work within those. We've done our best to do that. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Hearing none. Now you can go. Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to be heard in favor of this application? You didn't get sworn in, though, did you? Well, let me just do it again. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give here tonight will be true and accurate to the best of your belief? Come forward.
My name is Lydia Roberts. I'm a member of Andrew's staff. I don't have anything else to add. I think Marcus did a great job summarizing everything. So I just wanted to come up and show my support for the project.
I don't think there's probably any questions, but I have to follow the rules. Any questions for this person? Thank you. Anyone else in favor of this application? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to be heard against this? Hearing none. Any member of the board have any comments? Any further questions for staff? If not, then I believe we're ready to call the question.
I move that in the case of ZBA 2023-01 for minor variance to reduce the front yard. In this case, I move that we approve the minor variance with the condition that the work generally conforms to the site plan in Exhibit D.
Been so moved. Is there a second to that? Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. I believe we're ready for a vote.
Adam Roosh,
Yes.
Charles Warmbrun,
Yes.
Harvey Welch,
Yes.
and Joanne Chester.
And motion carries, and there's no further action taken, right?
Correct, minor variance.
Minor variance.
Go team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I will call for hearing ZBA 2023-C-02, a request by Jacob Gulquist for a conditional use permit to allow the expansion of an existing self-storage facility, including new drive-up units at 1808 South Philo Road, located in the B3 General Business Zoning District. And we have a staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, ZBA, for being here tonight, and everyone in the audience. So as you just heard, this is a request by Jacob Gulquist for a conditional use permit to expand an existing self-storage use at 1808 South Philo Road. That's the location of the business Urbana Secure Self-Storage, to include a new building which would contain drive-up storage units in an area of what's currently the parking lot. Self-storage facilities are allowed by a conditional use permit in the B3 General Business District. In 2004, Urbana City Council granted a special use permit for a self-storage use on the lot. At the time, a special use permit was the requirement for self-storage. That was changed to a conditional use permit by a 2010 text amendment. Because the conditions of the 2004 special use permit specifically permitted self-storage in the existing building, expanding the use to a new building in the current parking area requires a new conditional use permit. The 2004 memo for the special use permit that initially permitted self-storage in the building didn't actually explain the justification behind that criteria, so we can only assume it's the pretty similar criteria that boards often place on cases to just generally conform with the site plan at the time of the initial request. Staff find that in this case, the conditional use permit criteria have been met and are recommending that ZBA approve the request with a couple conditions that we'll explain later. We've received no public input on this case, and we did the typical public input procedure of notice in the News Gazette, a sign on the property, and mailings to properties within 250 feet. The property is located on the east side of South Philo Road and also has access off Colorado Avenue. It's zoned B3 General Business, as are most surrounding properties. The property to the north is zoned R5, medium high density, multiple family residential. Prior to the property's current self-storage use, it had been a grocery store and pharmacy. This is a site sketch provided by the applicant showing the location and dimensions of the proposed expansion. This would be a building 135 by 30 feet in area in a southern portion of the parking lot, and it would contain 28 drive-up storage units. Because the site's earlier grocery store use required considerably more parking than self-storage does, there's currently a surplus of parking on the site, and this would continue to be the case even following the proposed new building. As proposed, the new building would comply with all other typical B3 development regulations, such as floor area ratio, setbacks, and so on. This is a ground level site photo of the parking area where the building would be constructed. And then these are some drive-up storage units at the U-Haul facility a bit further south on Philo, just so you have some idea of the type of structure that's being proposed, although the applicant can perhaps speak more to his anticipated design plans. Moving into the conditional use permit criteria, staff find that they've been met in this case. Those are outlined in more detail in the staff report, but I'll try to quickly go through them. The first criteria for a conditional use permit is that the proposed use be conducive to the public convenience. We find this criteria met as the proposal would allow the existing business at the location to meet additional demand for their services within a part of their site that's currently underutilized. The second criteria is that the request would not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district where it's located. Staff find this criteria to be met because it would be a relatively small expansion of a use that's existed on the lot since 2004. The existing building has over 40,000 square feet of self-storage, and the proposed building would be an addition of a bit over 4,000 square feet. And then the final criteria for a conditional use permit is that the proposal would conform to the regulations, standards, and character of the district. Again, other than the conditional use permit requirement, it would comply with all typical B3 development regulations, and again, would also just be expanding an existing use that's been there for nearly 2 decades. And then U-Haul, as we saw, another self-storage facility a bit further south on Philo Road, also has drive-up units similar to what the applicant has proposed. Moving on to staff's recommendation, the Zoning Board of Appeals has the options in this case to either approve the conditional use as submitted, approve the conditional use along with any conditions or requirements as are appropriate or necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, and to carry out the purposes of the zoning ordinance, or you may vote to deny the request as submitted. Staff are recommending that the Zoning Board of Appeals approve the proposed conditional use permit with the conditions that first, the self-storage use on the lot shall be limited to the existing building and the proposed building shown in the submitted site plan, and that the placement and dimensions of the proposed self-storage building generally conform to what's shown in the submitted site plan, and that is right here. Thank you. And the applicant is here and can take questions directly. Otherwise, I can take questions for staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. I see recommendation number 1, self-storage use shall be limited to the existing buildings and proposed buildings shown in the submitted site plan. Does that mean that there would not be use allowed for like pods that are mobile self-storage units, and if people want to store boats and vehicles?
Yes, any other self-storage would need to come to ZBA again.
Okay, I'm looking at the site plan. Now, my first question, I guess, is where's the property, the south property line? You have the
I can pull up the site photo.
You have the CVS property there, and there's the grass island. Okay, on the one, it shows that this property has that grass island and then would have all the parking spaces and stuff. And then on the other one, it doesn't. So I'm kind of wondering, I'm kind of familiar with this property, but did CVS property get that little strip of property that's the island there? You following me? Just south of the.
I believe that area is currently on Urbana Secure Self-Storage's property. I think you can see it a bit north of where the south property line is there.
Okay, can you see where the difference is in the asphalt? The darker part?
Yes, I believe that portion and that island with the trees south of where the building would be, that's still Urbana Secure Self-Storage's property.
Okay, so you could come in the CVS entrance and go there. That's now marked as the drive-through for CVS to go around correctly, which nobody does. So then my next question is, the site plan really doesn't give me any idea how far away are we considered the south line of these buildings from the property line being the grassy area?
So I believe you can show that little 25 feet that's shown coming off the northwest corner of the building there. That actually shows the setback to the property line there, and that would be the nearest point to a property line from the new structure.
Okay, so
Although I should also say that whatever building eventually gets constructed would need to go through subsequent building safety and zoning review prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy and a building permit. So we would confirm compliance with setbacks at that time.
Well, what would a setback be in this particular instance? Because we need a car to be able to pull up to the door of the storage unit, so it has to be more than 5 feet, right?
I believe that the setbacks for a self-storage building would be the setbacks required for any principal structure, and then the aisle drive width wouldn't be changed and would still be in compliance with typical parking lot aisle width regulations.
So I have an aisle width and then a setback to add up to a number.
I believe that on both the south side and the north side of the new building, where units would be getting accessed from, those wouldn't be in a required yard. Where the required yard is would be further north and further south of those locations. And access drives are permitted in a required yard, so even northwest of the proposed building where there is an access drive, that's a situation where it is simultaneously an aisle or an access drive and a required yard. I guess I'm just not really clear on what the concern is.
I just want to know how far the south boundary is away from the property line, I guess, is my simple question. I've got 50 there, I see your 25, but I see nothing on the south.
Marcus, could you check the B3 side yard setback requirements for me? I think it's like 5 feet, maybe 10.
And then I guess, are we doing away with all those parking spots there that are on the north side of the grassy island area?
Yes, we would. Just as an example of our parking regulations, though, this was previously a grocery store. Grocery stores, under current regulations, I don't know at the time, it would have been built as a grocery store, but currently we require 1 parking space for every 300 square feet of a grocery store. For self-storage, we require 1 parking space for every 100 self-storage units. So you can see how that shift in requirements would leave the site with still more than enough parking even after this building is constructed in an area that's currently used for parking, or not used, as it's really more often the case.
Aren't those used for CVS though, right now?
I believe I could look into the building permits for CVS, but I think CVS would have to be meeting its parking requirements on its own lot, and I assume it probably does.
Yeah, that would have to be some sort of agreement between CVS and the other property owner if they wanted to defend that.
And if folks going to CVS really want to park on Urbana Secure Self-Storage's lot, they will still have more than enough parking.
So the side yard, minimum side yard requirement for B3 is 5 feet. And so the property line for this property is roughly, you can see the grassy island that you're talking about. The property line is south of the row of parking spaces on the south side of the island. So if you go up to the other site plan, that's at the bottom of the screen here is where the property line is. So you're roughly 50 feet away from your property line. So you're meeting your side yard setback 10 times over. And the drive aisles are part of the building permit review process. This request is simply for a conditional use permit to allow this use on the property. As Nick said, the building permit application, they would have to submit a zoning compliance worksheet, prove that they're meeting all of the setbacks and all of the parking spaces. If they don't meet those regulations, then the building permit would not get approved.
And the general conformance language for the suggested condition is generally understood to leave room for a bit of flexibility in the building permit review process. If, say, we think, oh, we actually need to shift the building maybe a foot or two west or east or whatever, that wouldn't be understood to conflict with general conformance with the submitted site plan.
I'll just say then, once again, I do not understand how you can have a storage unit like this with a 5-foot setback. Now, granted, well, you can't get a car in there. I mean, that's not the case here now, because you're telling me that they own all the way to the grassy knoll thing, and the CVS has repaved that, and they've done all that for 20 years.
I don't think it looks like CVS did repave that. If you look at this, that looks to me like this is where it's been paved, that L shape at some point.
All right.
I don't know.
Are there any further questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to be heard? Please come forward.
Oh, no.
Hello, my name is Jacob Goldquist. I am one of the owners of Urbana Secure Self Storage. First off, I want to thank Nick and Marcus for helping me a lot. I know I called Marcus probably a couple too many times. Secondly, I want to thank you guys for taking the time tonight. I do apologize for my poor site plan. I am in the works of getting a more elaborate plan. For starters, this obviously would help me grow my business, but it will also help bring more of the supply to the local market where there is the demand. We currently have all indoor climate control units that are a little on the higher end of price compared to typical drive-up storage outside. We're typically always 100% full, maybe a couple vacant. As school lets out, we're definitely full, and I think that there's a real need for the little bit lower priced outside drive-up units, nor do we have any more room inside for extra units. I hear everything Charles is saying, and I think I can answer a few of these questions, even though I have a poor display here for you. I don't know if you're able to see my mouse or not. So, first off, as Nick did mention, this is rough. I have plenty of room to adjust the building as needed when we go through the building safety process. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do yet. Andrew Fell and his team is helping me on the architectural end, and Brian Bradshaw is helping me on the engineering side of things. But I do know right now, as Nick said, I believe the bottom side, the south side of this grass area is actually our property line. These are, I know for a fact, are our parking spaces, Right now, this is roughly 16 to 19 feet deep worth of parking area. You then have a 20-foot drive that cars can access through here. I will not be taking that away. Where I intend to put the building, regardless of where I put it, will be sitting right on current parking spaces. I would use the outlined, right, it's hard to see in the picture. Also, this middle stuff is not here. That was just the way the GIS map showed up. This is all open area. But all this is currently lined for parking, and I simply would set the building on that area. So I would have a minimum of 35 feet just to this area. I believe it's actually closer to 40 to 50 feet, like Marcus said, to the property line. Really, the property line's down here, so it'd be even further. But I also would allow around 20 feet of drive for a car to access in and out of here. I don't know what the current, honestly, I don't know what the current easement agreement is between us and CVS. Obviously, we would obey any of that, but I don't intend on taking any access way that would affect them either. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you own this whole parking lot
Yes.
all the way back up north in the lot?
Back up north, yes, all the way over to, there's a grass lot right up here. We own up to that grass lot, and I believe it actually bumps around a little bit.
On the other, yeah.
Yeah, our north end of this building is rented to a developmental service center.
Right.
And they use a little bit of that lot for parking.
But you rent to DSC then, you're saying?
Yes, we are the landlord for
You own the
DSC.
whole building and the whole lot?
Yes, sir.
And I take my son there to DSC, and I know that that lot is largely empty anytime you go there.
Sure.
Because it had grocery store capacity, and now there's nowhere near that need for spaces. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. No, I don't remember exactly how many parking spaces there were. It was well over 100. As Nick said, I think I need 3, let's call it even 5 for the 200 units we have inside. And I need roughly another 10 parking spaces for developmental service center. We're gonna be left with still 50 to 75 parking spaces at least.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Okay. So my concern is the drive that you've described. It's painted drive-through window. The circulation to go to the drive-through prescription window at CVS, if anybody followed what has been laid out, would be to go east there, around, and come up to the window. So obviously, somehow you guys have agreed, evidently, to let them do that on your property at some point in time. So I guess my question is, and maybe you can't answer it, is there an agreement there? And then is there keeping that drive open like you said you would? You have no intentions of closing that, right? Or the
No,
parking?
sir.
Okay, so you've done that. Now, how close is that building to the edge of that drive? And is that a consideration that we're supposed to be looking at here?
I think as long as the drive there south of the building is in compliance with typical aisle drive width requirements, and that looks like it's a 2-way aisle drive there, it would be in compliance with our typical regulations and requirements.
Yes, as I would be setting within the current parking spaces. You know, I'm assuming when the current parking spaces were put in place, that was not by me, that they met whatever drive width regulation or requirements that there were. Obviously, when I do go to apply for building and safety, these requirements are going to pop back up. If right now, this is roughly, I don't know exactly, from this edge, the very north end of that grass area where it turns to the drive, is 20 feet from my proposed area. And if I run into a problem to where that's 19 feet and it needed to be 20, or I need to be, even if I needed to be 25, then I would either shift my building to the north, which would put me outside of the current parking spaces, or worst case scenario, I would have to narrow my building down. Right now, there is at least 20 feet from here, though.
See, I just, the worst scenario I can think of is I have a U-Haul truck. I've got mattresses and I've got everything in a big U-Haul truck, and I'm gonna come and I'm gonna park here. And I suppose I can park east and west, although people love to back things up. And if you backed up a U-Haul truck there, number one, I'm assuming that you're gonna have to be in that access drive that's there, if that's there.
I should also mention that I did run these plans by the city engineer and the fire safety chief, and they both gave a tentative okay based on this design and placement. So it would be in compliance with the width of a fire truck, which is pretty wide.
Okay, so see, I'm not really concerned. There's plenty of parking there. I'm just saying when somebody comes to utilize the unit, they're not gonna be parking way up north and carrying their stuff. They're gonna park right next to their door where we have 14 doors there. And 14 people aren't gonna be there at the same time. I realize that, that's not gonna happen. But to me, if we're gonna go with the property line as a grassy knoll, then I guess we're fine, is what we're saying. And if we're not fine, the city engineer and everybody and your inspectors are gonna make it, correct?
Yes.
And none of this ever gets done before we do these things, right?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, you are first on the list here. And, I would like to also say, we don't want to do anything that hurts CVS either. Quite frankly, any drive-through traffic to CVS is free advertisement to us. We are right there. Anything that we do has zero intention of hurting their business. If anything, their business and them being there helps us. So we will always keep that in mind, and we will follow any sort of requirements that are required by the city.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I don't believe so.
Thank you, guys.
Is there anyone who wants to be heard in favor of this proposal? Hearing none, or any persons wanting to be heard against this proposal? All right, then I believe that there aren't any more questions for staff. I believe then we are ready for this question.
I move to approve the proposed conditional use in case ZBA 2023-C-02 with the following conditions. First, that the self-storage use shall be limited to the existing building and the proposed building shown in the submitted site plan. And second, the placement and dimensions of the proposed self-storage building shall generally conform to the submitted site plan.
It's been so moved. Is there a second to that? Is there any further discussion? Then I believe we are ready to call this question for a vote. So we have roll call, please.
Joanne Chester? Harvey Welch?
Yes.
Charles Warmbrun?
Yes.
Adam Rush?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you, sir. At this time, do we have any unfinished business?
No.
Is there any new business? Thank you. Is there any new business?
There's not.
Any public input?
No.
Okay. Any staff report?
I would like to introduce our new CD director, Kim Smith.
Okay. Is it a study session?
Nope.
Then I move that we are adjourned.
Adjourned at 8:03 PM. Thank you.